Okay, good morning and welcome to the first Bluebeam meeting of 2019. Thank you for coming along. It's really great to have everyone here, and we've got a number of people dialing in from various parts of the world, and I'd certainly like to thank Nathan for dialing in from Denver, and really looking forward to his presentation from CPC and PDF standards and collaboration tools. Just before we get going, I'd certainly like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land that we're meeting today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and their elders, past and present. So what are we doing today? It's the first meeting of 2019. Really awesome that we're here. Hope everyone's enjoying the breakfast that's been provided. Just a quick introduction by me, and then we're going to go into part two of the Construction Progress Coalition presentation that was done by Sasha last year in November when she was here, and the part two is by Nathan. He's dialing in from Denver. We've got an awesome presentation coming up from Nick on 3D PDFs, and how they're used and a few little workflows that's there, and also something and to round out what's happening in 2019 from Bluebeam, and Kelly is going to present that and finish off the meeting for us. So look, we'll move on, and we'll get started into the presentation. So look, I'll just hand over to Nathan, and here we go. Thank you.
All right, yeah. So, not quite sure where Sasha left off last time, but we'll pretty much go through the gamut of the Construction Progress Coalition, originally Construction PDF Coalition, as well as the PDF guidelines that we produced back in 2014, all the way to our current efforts with the Common Data Exchange. So a quick background on myself. Nathan Wood here, Chief Enabling Officer with Spectrum AEC. Originally came from the general contractor's perspective, commercial construction, typically hospital work, as a BIM and project engineer. And it was around that time in 2013, 2014, with DPR was invited to join the other members of the Construction PDF Coalition at the time, and produce this guidelines that Sasha mentioned last time, and hopefully some of you have gone through. We'll go that together as well today. And then flash forward a few years later, kind of picking up the ball again with really trying to focus on what are the workflows in which PDFs and IFCs and all kinds of open exchange files, and really focusing on the RFI in 2017 with a report that we'll go through a little bit, and then how that led into the this CDX, or Common Data Exchange, in 2018 as sort of a way for us to communicate all kinds of open interoperability standards from PDF all the way to APIs and eventually blockchain. But first, the renewed CPC vision and mission. So again, CPC looks to bring together AEC professionals, as well as their technology solution providers, Bluebeam and others, as well as the owners and other governing organizations, to promote a common data exchange, or CDX, that will help project teams define their own interoperability standards, recognizing that every project is unique, and that there are decisions that need to be made at the project level. But ultimately, I think our vision between both industry and technology is to define a new baseline for how we measure project performance that looks beyond just profit and loss and schedule delays, but really looks at those leading indicators or key performance indicators across the design, build, inspect, and operate supply chain of a project, and really focusing on shared value, transparency, and streamlined collaboration. So, but let's go back to the original PDF guidelines. So depending on how deep Sasha went into it, there's really, it's a fairly simple guideline. Again, it's only 4 pages long. There's 4 sections that we'll go through here. You can see in the first one here about consistency. Really, this is just reference back to some U.S. national BIM and CAD standards. I'm sure there are, similar relevant standards within Australia that you have. I know Sweden, or the folks in Sweden have done the same thing, and other countries are kind of gathering gathering what are those CAD standards and BIM standards that need to be adhered to that allow PDFs to really take full advantage of the data that can be packed within them. And then the second section that we talk about is creation, because it was learned throughout this process that with the general contractors, we were thinking that it was, you know, a PDF or a Bluebeam problem, when really the challenge that we were facing was how are the PDFs being produced from the authoring tools that are Revit or CAD or, you know, other authoring tools. So really looking at, you know, what are things that now that we're not printing PDFs but we're putting them on iPads and other devices, what are things like efficient and inefficient hatch fill, or using true type fonts so that you can have, you know, better searchability, and really, you know, taking advantage of all of the metadata that is capable within a PDF. You know, may not be as much as an IFC, but there is a lot there, and it's such a usable file that we want to make sure that we capture as much as we can. So some of those sort of guidelines within there for the designers. The third one here is the distribution. So this is all about, you know, what are those questions that need to be asked in that kickoff meeting, whether it's a BIM execution plan or other project execution planning. It was nice, yeah, I think partly for this reason here, a few years later, we had our guidelines here referenced in the National Institute for Building Sciences BIM Guide for Owners, kind of as again, this is a tool that should be referenced to help owners decide what are the standards they want to implement. It's not necessarily just something that you copy and paste in, but it's a great reference guide, and great that, you know, the BIM folks are recognizing this as a conversation that does need to be had. The last section that we had in here was the metadata section, and so this is all about you know, the file naming and bookmarks and page labels and all these opportunities that we have to create much better hyperlinking and searchability and automation, but only when we have a certain level of standards set up. So again, we went sort of as far as we could with trying to define some level of standards, but I think in reality, once we got into it, it was too difficult to you know, get everybody to align on one standard. Usually it was the owner that was dictating the standards. So at least, you know, being able to have that conversation in the beginning is a lot of where we got, you know, kind of within this. So that was a version 1. As we now have technically a version 2 sort of skeleton out there that we're, you know, trying to get comments and review on. It looks at, you know, a little bit more sections as far as it breaks down the guidelines in now 3 sections, so it tries to simplify it, but by simplifying it, we probably made it 20 or 30 pages, because each of these we break down for naming convention and plot location and markup colors and all these other things. You know, what is this 4-phase approach of digest, debate, decide, and deliver that we need to go through? And so kind of this is the current state of where the PDF guidelines are at. We've had, you know, some great success stories of folks from California to Chicago to New York referencing these guidelines, using kind of some of the language in here and inserting it in contracts, and then being able to enforce those standards downstream. But I guess I'll pause here before we go into the RFI stuff to see if there's any questions on this PDF content.
Any questions? No?
So you said you've had pretty good uptake. Is that from across consultants, or is it mainly been driven by a particular group like government, or is it just like really general good uptake?
Yeah, it's actually been, well, one of the great examples is actually Lendlease, Australian company in LA that was driving it, because they were more from like an owner developer standpoint. The other use case we've been seeing it being driven is from the general contractor use case. Power construction in Chicago was actually kind of using it as a tool to build better relationships with their owners, and get that inputted into contracts that they could then kind of enforce those requirements onto the design team once they started interacting with them. And then the third use case was we've had some like city municipalities and other inspection agencies that are starting to require it for their PDFs, so that they can do more efficient plan review.
Have you got much uptake overseas? So obviously in the States it seems to be quite big, but outside of the US, how are things traveling?
So the intent of this is, again, to be replicated. So we saw that the Sweden is a great example, and I know if you follow Sasha on Twitter, she has been putting out a lot of stuff recently because they've been talking about it a lot in the UK. So we're seeing different examples where, again, this guideline should not be adopted outside the US. It's based on US standards and other references. What we want is for it to be referenced and copied and kind of, take what works for you and change what doesn't, and kind of recreate this is sort of our intent of what we're trying to do. Cool. And then again, if you haven't already downloaded them, constructionprogress.org/PDF is where you can download version 1 and version 2. And always reach out for more questions on this, because yeah, obviously it's very, very critical part to a lot of the greater automations and things you can do within Bluebeam are kind of, it's only as good as the quality of the PDF that you're getting. So I really want to focus on getting high quality PDFs to ensure all that automation works. But as we know, within the design and construction industry, high quality PDF output is just one of the many shared pains that we all face with just open standards and open interoperability, and kind of streamlining that collaboration. So one area that we continue to come back to in this pain point is RFIs. And sort of this challenge of, I think, many folks look at the cost impact, per RFI and a lot of these delays or lack of response and the risk and waste that comes with it. But I think a lot of folks, especially on the technology side, like to claim that they eliminate RFIs. But I think, those of us from the industry that recognize that the request for information is actually something of value, and that there is a difference between a good RFI and a bad RFI. And so this report is sort of both educating industry about, educating technology about how we should think about the tool of an RFI, but then also educating both sides of how do we need to think and act, and how does the process need to change in order to improve RFIs and move more of these RFIs into that good zone before the bound of realization, and not in the bad zone where we've already built it and these RFIs are costing much higher amounts, much more waste in the industry. But so part of what we did in the report, and one of the presenters, Todd Sutton out of Texas, brought up some really interesting statistics about the true waste that we're creating. This $15.8 billion US a year that we create between architects, contractors, trade contractors, and owners. And that number one cause there being manual reentering of data from application to application. And how can we reduce that manual reentry, and knowing that RFIs is a huge time suck and waste, where multiple people are entering data multiple times from trade contractor to GC up to designer and owner. So we sort of tried to draw a map from this ideal state of how BIM and this common data environment should connect everything, and then sort of the reality of all these different stakeholders, these different players, and the internal and external and private and public exchanges that occur, and sort of this reality that it's not as simple as just a one-piece throughput. There's a lot of kind of contractual terms that we had to deal with. But some of the conclusions that we came back with was that really what we need is to establish some tiers, some kind of contractual tiers of informal, formal, and public, and that we need a better job of kind of mapping. Okay, not every RFI is the same, but every RFI should follow some sort of a path, and that we establish sort of these informal and formal barriers, and that we want to have as many of these green informal issues as possible. That's a good thing, to reduce the number of formal RFIs and hopefully ultimately eliminate any public change orders. And so some of the conclusions, some of where we got in 2017 was, okay, can we actually map out the individual data fields? We were calling it an MDX back then, minimum data exchange, that eventually became what's now the CDX, or common data exchange. But recognizing that we have both tiers and we have different data file exchanges between, here in the US we have AGC XML, we all obviously know IFC, and many other file types that need to exchange. And so what is the common data between those was really the precursor to what led us to 2018. So I guess I'm curious, within Australia, like is RFI something that you guys are challenged with, or is that something that is not as much of a challenge as maybe some other workflows?
I get RFIs every day with my estimating. They tend to just come through bid contender or something. It's just a request, or I send the request out. We share the information. PDFs don't really come into it unless I'm copying and pasting it straight from the RFI straight into my documents to say, hey, this is what we've got. This is how we're going to price it on. We just send it back. So it's the quality of the PDF that I find can be a problem sometimes if the scanned document in the RFI is crap, and that's where it all goes all silly.
Exactly, yeah, when it's coming from somewhere outside. Because, if it's inside your company, you can stay within your platform and it's fine. It's when you got to exchange between the platforms.
Yeah, so because everything's about time, and like you say, it costs money. We've got dates to meet, and we're trying to do everything as quickly as we can. We're trying to process the information as fast as we can. So we do scans of the documentation to see what words are related to my trade. When the trades are mixed up and it's all part of the same document, it can be a real pain in the ass trying to target exactly what's electrical in my case. So.
That's a great point, and I think that is something of how could we have better tagging requirements that would actually kind of automated using sort of a checker, check which trades are impacted and actually have that be reliable. But you have to have contracts that actually enforce it that way too, right? Even if the technology is able to do it. Oh,
did you read the documents? That's 300 pages long. I've only had it for an hour. I'm not that quick. Like so I got ACR the document, look for electrical, try and find it, process it, put the price, it, slap it back to them. Hopefully in the same 24-hour period, but sometimes it's challenging to do all that.
Yeah, and even just measuring how long that takes and some of those root causes, I think that's what will eventually get us to those leading indicators that we're talking about, and a lot of where we got to in this last year with the Common Data Exchange or CDX report that came from our sophomore second year summit. So had more sponsors. Obviously want to thank Bluebeam and everyone for kind of helping us be able to put together this big sort of expo area in the middle of this large 2,000 person conference in Southern California to actually talk through these workflows, talk through submittals, talk through RFIs, talk through as-built handover, and kind of what is this common data exchange or CDX language that will help us to better communicate the differences in requirements, but also how we can maybe make the process better and actually speed things up by changing the way that we do things from the onset, and kind of this giving us that tool set to be able to start manipulating that process and showing people more efficient workflows. So we already talked about some of the challenges, the 15.8 billion in waste. I saw a great stat about 42 different unique data standards just related to BIM and LOD, if you look globally. And that really, at the end of the day, this is becoming less and less a technology issue and more, these top three factors of people, adoption of technology, and this industry collaboration. And, if you ask me, it's more the incentive to collaborate. Hopefully we see more uptake and adoption of the IPD contracts and other shared risk and reward. But ultimately, these shared pains, like when people ask, what is a shared pain? It's a great sort of simple example is literally, two things not being able to talk to each other. If you ordered a TV from the UK and had different standards, even if you bought the converter plug, once we did buy that converter plug, we actually blew the TV because I didn't realize, they're on a different amp system. But regardless, that's just one example of frustrations where because just two people built standards that didn't talk to one another, and we always try and build these translators between them, but we'll always face some of these shared pains. So how does that happen in the digital world as we're now trying to connect all these paper and static and serial workflows and get them to all be much more efficient, much more integrated, and much more collaborative? It's going to be a tough road to climb, and so we're ready to do it though. And so the 4 topics that we started with here, you can see is design change to impact report. So kind of after that RFI happens, then what? The field data to dashboard report was a great conversation with DeWalt and Bluebeam around how do we collect field data and get it into a more common dashboard feel for everyone to measure those leading indicators. The as-built exchange has, and actually, I think, Russell, we were talking earlier that's definitely a pain point right now of how do we set the standards and then how do we make it more efficient so that handover process is seamless and is kind of one package and not all these different files scattered everywhere. And then the last one being transforming the submittal exchange, knowing that clean handoff from design to the fabricator has never been easy. And so how do we better define what that should be in the age of BIM and digital workflows? So those were those 4 topics there. The one way we do talk a little bit about the CDX and the Common Data Exchange is I don't know if you guys, well, I'm sure UL is universal, but the UL certification was a huge time saver for me as a project engineer doing punch list and confirming fire ratings or kind of other areas where they've done a really good job of meeting the needs of the designers, the fabricators, and the inspectors to kind of ease those pains with different standards and code standards that existed across industries. So we kind of want to do the same type of thing with the way the data standards work, knowing that they're going to come from a lot of different places, but let's find the commonality between them. Okay, so let's get in a little bit of the language here and see if we can, we'll probably have some questions after we get through this one. But one of the first questions that we ask when it comes to CDX stuff is, as a company, can you communicate what your, we'll call it tech stack or your, tech stack is the best word that we've kind of used for it, but it consists of, your system of record. So where are you tracking all of your accounting or tracking all your project management data? And then what are all those different point solutions that are necessary at the project level to make this stuff work, where we're either exporting or importing PDFs that have some level of metadata within them, or maybe we're using a studio session and it's more of a collaboration platform where we're kind of inviting people in and we can track a lot more data than just what's on the PDF. But either way, we have to communicate between these different systems of record, and that's not going to go away anytime soon. But one way that I think is really interesting, as we get away from, or I mean not away from PDFs, but the fact that just like we were talking about before, if you've got an internal integration, then API or XML can make that a lot faster than a PDF. So how do you do both? How do you have 2 systems of record talk to each other through APIs and collaboration platforms, and move away from file export and import? I think that's an ultimate goal, but the reality of this is that we're going to do all of these, and so we have to have standards for all of them, and that's kind of the whole point of this. So I won't nerd out too much unless there's people that have questions about this, but the data package itself, and knowing that metadata is made up of structural taxonomies and administrative values and descriptive values, and kind of how we treat each of those does get pretty sensitive. But ultimately, I think that the biggest question that we should all be asking at the project or at your company level is, who owns that common data environment, or the CDE? And is that CDE a platform? Is it something that the owner owns and that everybody is kind of putting their information into, or does each person kind of have their own system of record that they think is the CDE, and there really is no CDE? And ultimately, what is that as-built CDE that the owner's getting, and how reliable is that? I think is the question that we continue to ask, and hope that this will address in some fashion. But Russell, I mean, I don't know. We were talking before about some of those challenges. I guess I'd be curious to understand a little bit more. What the current state with the as-built handover is.
Certainly, well, in New South Wales, it's certainly very fractured. Some is good, some is bad. Something that sort of sprung to mind as you were talking. We have there is a sort of a move to try and standardise some of the municipal data through, I know it by the acronym anyway, called ADAC. It does mean something. I'll certainly dig up those details for you. But some of the vendors over here are trying to push that information as far as standard data or metadata for stormwater pipes and water pipes and all that sort of stuff. And that's been driven certainly out of Queensland. It's starting to find its way around the rest of the country. But yeah, I mean, it is very sort of a mixed bag. A lot of it's just sort of PDFs that half the time are the construction PDF. One scribbles a bit of red line on them and chucks a stamp on it and signs it, and then that's the record. There's certainly, it's a bit hit and miss whether you have anything remodeled or scanned or anything like that to get a final survey. And I mean, the only time we really see the proper, I suppose, FM models are on some of the bigger, more high-end projects. So Sydney Opera House obviously has a massive FM model. It's really detailed and got everything you ever need in it to do whatever you want to do with the structure. But someone's house, obviously, there's probably nothing. If someone's kept their design plans, yeah, you might have something, but other than that, good luck with that, which is not obviously the right thing to have. But yeah, it is a very, as Paul alluded to, it's very obviously cost driven. So people see this as a cost. But I mean, it'll probably be something that we'll have to work through over time to.
Yeah, no, it sounds. I mean, that's exactly what the UK is going through right now, right? With their whole BIM level 2 attempts, and yeah, how far downstream can you go? Yeah, you're not going to go to the residential level, but do you go, all government funded buildings? You go, where are the areas where folks are requiring this? Because I think the worst thing that can happen is we have those requirements, but then nobody knows how to adhere to them, and that's I think a lot of the trouble that we face with some of the early BIM standards, like the Government Services Administration (GSA) in the U.S. here is a good example of kind of some of these challenges where they set a requirement that was very well intentioned but very hard to adopt. And we're going to need a lot more of that in this industry. And so I think part of this idea of the CDX is, how do we communicate how things need to change in order to meet the new standards that are going to be necessary in this kind of Uber, Lyft world where, I've had great examples where even actually Sasha Reed's house in South Austin, if you try and use Uber or Lyft or different ones, it won't be able to go to her house because it's a new development where the GPS location of the house is set at the beginning of the road that it was supposed to be built on, which is about a half mile away. And it's little things like that, like how does that as built of the GPS of that house location be updated? That's the type of stuff that I think is really interesting to see where are those points where we can get that information right, whether you're doing transportation projects or residential or commercial. There's a lot of information that is created in the building process that could be taken advantage of downstream. We just don't currently because no one's sort of asked the question before.
And I suppose one of the biggest things, and there's a lot of examples of where this has gone wrong in Australia, and I imagine it's probably similar in the States. Just the existing situation. Mm-hmm. So effectively, what's there now? So when you dig a hole in the ground, no one knows what's there. And the underground services, and obviously how that's linked into the metadata and common data environment and records and everything like that is something that there's a huge problem in Australia and a huge cost to all their projects as well.
Yeah, same for us, absolutely. And so I think, actually that's a great point. So underground, mapping of utilities is one where, I don't think we're just going to one day pay a bunch of money to go map everything, pay to map it and then, have it stored digitally. But I do think there's a way that we could, from project over project, be able to, as we go out and verify, how can you then take that verification and make that a digital verification, and people can see when it was last checked and who it was checked by, so that maybe they don't need to dig and test in that area because they saw that someone 6 months ago just did in that area. But we can't do that today if we don't track those types of inspections. And I think this whole idea of a CDX playbook that you're looking at here is taking all these different stakeholders that are kind of required or that pass data between each other that could be as PDF or as IFC or as APIs or other, and kind of where are they creating or accepting and checking the information as it goes along. And this would be, a great way of kind of talking about how would we inspect at transportation level where those underground utilities are being mapped and going across. But in this case, this is talking about from a design change that happens in the construction phase. How do we, map that cost impact? So it's meant to be a flexible tool that looks at a project in 4 distinct phases of kind of the programming phase before we start detailed design, and then kind of that BIM coordination or just design detailing if you're more traditional, before crossing that boundary of realization, which could be either a hard bid or it would be your submittal phase if you're in a more design build project, and then going into phase 3 of the actual construction phase before crossing that boundary of certification into operations and maintenance. The tiers here that you can see, and actually I'll skip ahead to a little bit to them, but they start with the tier 0 here of the accommodated environment that we've been talking about. I think one thing that Bluebeam Studios do a great job of, and we don't leverage enough, is this idea of a tier 1 that is sort of this informal collaboration zone where it doesn't necessarily, you're not penalized for your responses, but we kind of encourage more collaboration so that we can have less of those formal design RFIs that are in tier 2 and ultimately reduce our tier 3 cost and schedule and maintain that owner's vision up in tier 4. I'll pause here and see, if this is making sense. I actually have some specific examples related to Bluebeam that we can talk about in a second here, but I want to just pause and see if there's any questions before we keep going.
Is there anyone on the phone that has questions?
Okay.
I'll do it.
All right.
One of the biggest problems is what we're talking, especially the underground services.
Mm-hmm.
Is you've got the private sector, and you've got the public sector, and then you've got the information sharing. There's always a cost involved when you try and get detailed information about what's under the ground, and either somebody has to go to the site. It would be very hard to get all that onto one document, say Google Earth or Google whatever, because it's a cost factor. Nobody wants to share information unless you pay for it. So that's your biggest hurdle for that kind of document sharing, that you either got to join a club or do something with this kind of system. Sounds great, but I know in reality, because I do it all the time looking for services, there's a cost factor, there's a dollar factor. In tendering stage, nobody wants to spend money at that time. And this is where that's the biggest hurdle you're going to have to try and get all that to work. People just want money for everything.
Absolutely, yeah, and from all sides, right? I think,
yeah, correct.
And that, but like that, yeah, and that's how we did. I guess if we continue to use that as the excuse, that's how technology does disrupt us, right?
Correct. I mean, even from protection on PDF, I'll get a PDF and it's protected. I can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
It's protected because somebody put a lot of work into it and they don't want to share their information. So straight away, I can't do anything with it. So then I'm going to manually type it in or manually do something else to get that information to my documentation, again, which makes more time and money. So that's the hurdle that you're going to face.
And those are the perfect examples when those are happening, because any municipality or someone who's smart enough to know how to lock their PDF means that some consultant was talking to them and convinced them to do that, which means they can be convinced to do otherwise. So, people don't know what they don't know, and there are all these downstream repercussions when decisions get made upstream, like you're talking about. I have a perfect example from Irvine, California, of the same issues and all the workarounds that had to be done just because they wanted some level of security that they didn't really understand what that security even was. So I think that is, again, part of this CDX language is, okay, help me, Mr. Owner, understand what it really is that you're concerned about from a data sharing or transparency or whatever, and let's figure out, a creative way to solve it rather than just, complaining and pointing fingers.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm an engineer from the as-built perspective, because sometimes in our scope of works, as-builts will be left out. So then we just coordinate up to construction. Then anything that happens after that point, we have to sort of go chasing variations to update our drawings, or we just officially close them out in RFIs to changes to the structure. So you got to get to the end of your project, and nobody's sort of willing to, or nobody, you don't want to spend all this time updating these drawings to as-builts if you're not getting paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
So that usually always seems a hurdle towards the end of the project, because there's no real benefit at that point.
Exactly, and if the owner doesn't care for it, then
exactly.
Don't do it, right? It's just having the conversation. If they do, then make sure they understand the cost of it, so that they'll pay for it, right? So it's about having that conversation up front. So to say, we can do this, and here are those potential benefits to you, but here's that cost in order to get those benefits. Smart engineers and contractors will do that up front, but too often their competitors are saying, oh yeah, we can do that free, but that's not free, right? And I think that's part of this. I don't know if that's a problem in Australia. That's certainly a problem in the U.S. is that we oversell these things and try and package them for free when they're not free. They're an extra value add, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of skip through these quickly, because at the end of the day we have to understand there's a difference between a database and a data package. packages are deliverables that get sent between databases that can be private or public. We're going to define more of these exchanges, RFI, submittal, change order, as built exchanges. And the listed definition will be essentially kind of that minimum viable standard that all the technology players will have to say, hey, I can meet this minimum standard, so that it gives you guys in the room the opportunity to have that conversation with the owners and have that project kickoff to define what your value exchanges are based on those listed definitions. And then we can get into more detail of how might we actually verify some of those data fields and actually be able to check them either manually or in an automated way, and then ultimately creating rules that will allow us to have a true common data environment database on a CDX platform that knows kind of if something comes in with these CSI codes tagged, it knows which engineers and contractors to contact, based on those rules, and that we can create RFI or submittal studio sessions, based on those same rule sets, and that we have that whole definition based on a CDX session. So again, it's applying both a visual and kind of language to how we need to redefine our workflow standards based on the capabilities of today's technology. And then this is just, again, much more detail on, as you get into the actual metadata itself, the structural taxonomies coming from all those existing standards that are already out there, the administrative components really being validated at that project level, because every project and every stakeholder is a little bit different, but ultimately wanting to verify those descriptive fields that get put in and be able to hopefully one day store them in more of like an industry or universal database for machine learning, data mining, other things like that, natural language processing. So that's kind of that step 1, 2, 3. I say it's easy because it's really not that easy at all, but it is pretty clear what those steps are. And if we could just start workflow by workflow with RFI, submittals, and so on, going through this process and focusing on the project level, these reports that we come out with, these case studies, we hope to be the new standards that others adopt and replicate off of. So just to kind of show how this playbook can be used, we'll talk about what's what we call a typical RFI. So if you got a general contractor who has an RFI, project management solution, we would have someone in the field that is asking that RFI to them, or having, I guess that would be a coordination issue. We wouldn't necessarily make it a formal RFI yet, but if it did require to be a formal RFI, then that would have to be sent to the design professional or engineer. They would then send that response back to the RFI, and the GC would have to approve that before delivering that back to the field. So it's a pretty straightforward, serial, not that efficient process, but it works. We can do integrations. We can use Bluebeam to create the RFI. We can use Bluebeam to review and respond to the RFI. Whatever the GC is using as their PM solution, whether it's Aconex or others, they can store that and have that data record. And hopefully that's a nice, as clean of a process as we can make it, but it's still kind of based on the more traditional way of doing it. So my kind of challenge and kind of question this group of, why can't we leverage the power of studio, not just studio projects, but studio sessions, and try and invite that as the RFI collaboration or issue collaboration, so that regardless of what tool you may be using in the field to identify an issue, it can go into a studio session. The formal responses to those RFIs from the designer or the engineer can come back using their tools, and ultimately we can kind of have this cloud collaboration session using Bluebeam Studio Session. But I think as folks have already talked about, there's a million reasons why we can't do it. But I think the hope is that if we're trying to communicate, do you want to do it this way, or do you want to do it this way? I think we'll be able to convince more folks why they want to do it the more collaborative way, and hopefully showing it to them visually and showing some of the ROI metrics on the time savings will get more owners and other players to say yes to these new styles of workflows.
On that topic,
I guess, yeah. Oh, yeah. Questions?
In your experience in the US so far, how have you found, so the current one up on the screen, so essentially the different way of working, say using as studio sessions and studio projects. How do you find government clients have reacted to something like that? Because typically, at least I find for us, that they're probably the biggest barrier to entry. So that, you know, for example, you know, a lot of the work that I do is 99% government clients, and that there's a really, really, really high barrier for entry that they just refuse to either acknowledge or adopt something that they don't either understand or that is new. I think is a good way of saying it.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly right. They don't if they don't understand it, you know, you have to talk through it. So in my experience, going back to 2011, I first started using studio sessions for formal submittal review with the licensed engineer, and again, this was on an integrated project delivery hospital, and it was not being used by the state inspector, so it was not dealing with the government. But you know, in my time with DPR's innovation team, probably went to 24 different project teams to convince their design team that was very hesitant to use the studio sessions for their design and submittal reviews. And every single time we came out with a different final standard of how they wanted to do it, but every single time they said, yes, we want to do it, because, you know, if you, as long as you ask the right questions to hit on their pain points and go, oh, you're facing that too? Okay, great. We've got a solution for that. Now, how are we all going to act differently to make that work? You know, I think, and sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you can't get to the person that actually has the influence to make that change. But hopefully, if you can, you know, kind of put yourself in their shoes and try and understand, okay, where maybe they are facing a similar pain point and communicate it more from that side. We've seen that get a lot more traction, at least here in the U.S.
And what I'm finding as I'm sort of making my way around Australia, promoting Bluebeam to the masses, we're finding a large adoption at the council level. It's the state level that's taking obviously a little bit longer to make that change, and obviously all of the investment in infrastructure currently happening in Australia, that's where we need to start really start targeting a lot of these federal influencers within government to create these sort of standards and requirements on these projects. But from a council level, they're like, there's quite a large adoption with regards to using studio sessions and projects across Australia.
See,
that's awesome.
They don't want to learn. People set from 20-year-olds to my age and all, they just don't want to learn. I try to teach them something and it's all too hard. And it's just a mentality that I experience a lot every day from people educated and not educated. I just find that's a big deal.
But I think it's also about how you position the software solution as well. And going back to Nathan's point, and essentially letting them know that Bluebeam, you know, the way Sasha does a great job of this, you know, kind of describing it, PDF's the paper and Bluebeam's your pencil. There's not really a huge change in the way that they're doing things. They're just digitizing it. So it's that first initial adoption step. So I think when people are afraid to adopt technology and they're afraid to, you know, kind of move the industry forward, they're thinking BIM, 3D modeling, oh my God, I have to change the way I do everything. They're overthinking it exactly. But when you sort of ease them in, and that's where I think Bluebeam in the US started very, very successfully, was taking that, you know, user approach up rather than trying to through the design phase and into the construction phase, where we're kind of started from the construction phase upwards to get people who are afraid of technology, afraid of doing things a little bit differently, and kind of easing them into that, again, what Nathan said with that shared pain, and going, well, we all experience this. Let's just take that first step into moving into the digital world in construction.
Yeah, and I think that was really the beauty of a lot of the Bluebeam capabilities within Project and other things that I liked, was there was so much flexibility to change, because the answer was always, it depends. And so you can manipulate the workflow to be very traditional and not as innovative, but at least they're moving off of paper onto something electronic or digital, and then, you know, crawl before you walk, before you run, and then eventually they'll be over it, you know, in that area. But yeah, I think that's the nice thing, is we should be able to help them with each step along the way and not feel like they have to dive in head first.
I like it when they keep printing drawings out and they keep printing and printing and printing. I said, stop the printing. Use the computer. You've got a computer. Look at the screen. Oh, Can't visualize it. Got to see it on paper.
And
Yeah.
to be fair, some people, like I've been on projects where they've got a Wacom tablet and that's their paper essentially. So it's that initial step where they're like, okay, the paper still exists. It's just on a screen.
And that's fine.
And they start to sort of move into it that way.
We've got $20,000 worth of printers at the office, and they buy the paper and they print it. Then they go store it or throw it away. And I'm saying, guys, stop this.
Yeah.
Get used to this new technology. And here's me talking, and everyone, just going, we'll just do it this way. How do we get the drawing? See, this is the thing. The guys on site need paper because the work environments are pretty bad to have a tablet or something like that. So, okay, fair enough. But in the office, there's no excuse to have papers in the office.
We started using like a digital markup workflow, and this is an example of that. And the existing folder structure that our company had didn't really allow to have a fully soft copy workflow for marking up drawings and getting them drafted. And then we sort of kept on showing them, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it. And now they've redone the folder structure, and I said, can you please put in a folder system that allows us to do the soft copy? And now they've made a company standard of how to mark up drawings electronically. So, but it took 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, how easy is it just to put a triangle or square or something on your screen? There's a PowerPoint, there's a light fitting, it's been marked up, done electronically, put it back in your pocket. You could do that on anything. And then you give it to your draftsman, then the draftsman then puts it to AutoCAD or whatever, and done deal. As built are done straight away as we go. So it's saving time and money.
Definitely.
To that way too.
No, those are all great examples, and shoot, I mean, ideally, I don't know if this conversation came up with Sasha, but if there are projects that are trying to push some limits with new ways of working or new styles of collaboration, those are the types of kind of CDX initiatives that we're looking to write more of these case studies and reports around of what was that kind of painful process of breaking down the right way to do it, but then by telling those lessons learned, I think ultimately it helps others get onto this digital platform, because for those of us who are obviously know and love Bluebeam, and especially if you're using any of the studio features, it's just so much easier when things are up in the cloud and things are syncing in real time. But it's really hard because it only works when everybody's in there, and getting everybody in there can be tough. But I think if we focus just workflow by workflow, so you can see here we have 4 abstracts that we're focusing on in 2019. The RFI one is back again because I think we have a much better understanding of just focusing on from a trade contractor to a general contractor, not fully dealing with the design liability side, but just from that side, really mapping out the RFI. We're going to do some interesting stuff on WIP reporting, so work in progress or work in place, and kind of automated production tracking will be another initiative. We have one initiative that was a big conversation at the Bluebeam Extreme conference around, okay, can we truly have location-aware PDFs in both 2D and 3D, ways to potentially use like a marker and a QR code within a PDF that would understand its relative location and scale of the page, so that other markers or different things on a page could actually know the location just as it would in a 3D environment. And then as we're doing way more scans of drones or other laser scanning out in the field, what is their kind of location awareness and tie back? Anyone who's dealt with that knows how challenging that can be. So it's really trying to tackle the integration and awareness of location between both 2D, 3D virtual, and reality capture files. And then the last one is again getting into that submittal review, looking at projects that aren't traditional hard bid and are a little bit more progressive, and really trying to redefine what submittals can be. So any projects that fit that boat, looking for opportunities to showcase that at a pilot project level as well. So let's see. I think so that was about it. Again, all of the links to all the documents here are available, PDF guidelines, the RFI report, CDX report. We do have a podcast now. We have 6 episodes from season 1 last year. We just came out with season 2, our first episode, which is all about APIs and kind of this open API revolution and this thought that nobody wants to share data, which we don't, but the reality is we are, and we're all kind of being pushed in that direction. So kind of interesting conversations there. And then I know it's a little bit of travel for you guys, but if anyone does happen to be in Southern California in May, weather's great then, and we'll be there for AEC Next again, doing these conversations, trying to map out these different workflows together with industry and technology.
No worries. Well, thanks very much, Nathan. That's been an amazing presentation. We've got a lot recorded, so be sure to share that with people in Australia and get a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if anyone's either facing those government pains or sees opportunities or anything, we'd love to have more folks come on board, join as a member, or if you have questions, reach out to me, Nathan at constructionprogress.org, and happy to share any more information or connect you where I can.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, we might move on from that wonderful presentation to the next one. Nick, you got the floor, mate.
No more final questions at all for Nathan before he
No, thanks, Nathan.
takes off? Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. Good luck.
All right, so share my Let me just try. Yeah.
Cool. Yep. So my name's Nick. I'm a structural engineer. I work for Robert Berg Group, and I just put my hand up to sort of show, or to give mainly a little introduction and an overview of 3D PDFs, because when I've saw a few videos and played around with them, and I thought they were pretty cool, but there were a few things that I was the interface and the way you use them isn't exactly intuitive, I think, especially as compared to the base Bluebeam. So just sort of as an example, if I've got a simple IFC model here, I'm just going to open up the Bluebeam. Right. Or 2019.
2019 or 2019. Delve into
The beta.
So if I've just got like a simple IFC model, you can always just drag and drop, and it'll just throw it straight into Bluebeam. It doesn't take too long. Just gonna go. Just make it nice and big. Landscape. Okay. It's not a very flashy model. It's just a concrete structure, concrete floor plate. So when you're at the top here, you've obviously got your navigation options, but your right click always moves your camera. See the little dot in the middle of the screen? So this gets hard. If that dot is up there and I'm trying to pan and scroll zoom, and I'm trying to rotate it down, it's always going to rotate around that X, the blue X on the screen. And it took me ages to try and work out how, it took me ages to work out how to actually get that on the element or on the sort of 3D object. So even though it's sitting on my structure now, if I try and rotate around that point, sometimes, see how it's sort of up in the air? So you can be way up in the air, but still look like you're on the structure. So the best way to get around that is you can always just select an object, right click, and you can go zoom to part, and that will put your red dot at the center of that object, your blue square. There's a ton of online videos, and I'm sure we can share some of those that I did during my research, but they recommend you use spin. So I was using rotate for ages, but spin's much easier to navigate around. I don't know the exact difference between the two, but it just seems to make it easier.
Spin, big 360, where rotate might be just left and right.
Yeah, it just seems to.
I've never used it. That's just interesting. So you just dragged and dropped that file and just put it straight on the table.
Yeah, drag and drop an IFC model.
IFC.
Yeah, drag and drop an IFC. So I sort of split up into two sections. Like if you get sent a 3D PDF, we create your own. Yes, if you get sent a 3D PDF, how to navigate around it, and then obviously you can export your own from Revit and from Navisworks.
I was going to say, are there more different type of files for bin?
So it's a UD,
Yeah.
a UD 3D,
Yeah.
U3D.
3DM?
Okay.
Yeah.
So will Bluebeam see all these? Yes, no, maybe.
I'm not sure on all the different file types, but I know IFC, and then when you export using the Revit and Navisworks plugins, it exports it as a 3D.
So you can do a 3D PDF.
Can you do the same thing by just grabbing the folder and just whacking it straight in, or do you actually have to open it? No,
Yeah,
it's as simple as that?
Yeah, it's as simple
Yeah.
as that. Yeah, you just drag and drop.
Because you're only just touching it now, and I'm just want to learn a bit more about
Yeah,
it.
I see this more a lot. I've just done a simple model here, but I see it a lot in services. So they will send around, if there's a clash or something, they'll send around a 3D PDF instead of a whole lot of screenshots of Revit models with clashes. They'll just get their scope box, export it, and put a comment on it and say there's a clash here, and you can spin around and have a look yourself.
Mikhail's got
I think
a
if you just drag the file in Bluebeam, it will open as long as it is IFC file, a PDF file, or it's U3D file.
Yeah, UD3.
Or any images, raster images file, so you can drag in.
The other, if you not to take over your presentation, if you type on the 3D little square under the markups list button, type that, see how all of your data from that IFC file should start appear. And if you start turning on and off columns there, you'll start getting element IDs, you'll start getting a lot of that information as well. So as you can achieve with IFC and Bluebeam.
Yeah, I think I've got.
What about the layers?
I can do
But
this.
not to try to take you
That's
off
right.
course. It's one of those
So-
things people don't realize that data
That's good, eh?
it exists in Bluebeam, or that you can actually see that data,
But see, for me, that would be
isolating
really-
elements and
And they're not heavy. They're not heavy either.
Yeah, but if I need to know cable routes, if I'm looking for a new cable route, I can see that much clearer than
Yeah.
trying to visualize 10 drawings in my brain. I can see, oh, maybe we can go down there, and done, yeah.
And yeah, so there's a ton of different options, like rendering options, lighting options, but you've got your sectioning tool, so similar to Navis tool. You got your sectioning tool. You can click on your sectioning tool, obviously move it. If I get the right thing, move it up and down.
Yep.
Then over on your left here, see the alignment, the Z plane. So instead of using this transform box, and you can obviously rotate the planes manually, but obviously it's got all the default ones. You've got your X, your normal X the other side, Y plane. So it's just like using, and then, sorry, another really nice option is the show clipped as transparent. So then you can still show the rest of the structure as transparent. And then obviously you've just got, you can, if I change the tilting on this X plane, tilt, and then I hit reset, it should just reset it back to the Y plane. So it's I'm trying to think what else was there on this. Oh, one thing that I kind of lost, say you've got this bottom part hidden and you accidentally hide your 3D hover bar, and you're like, where did all my options go? Even if they're down here, to make it show up on the screen, it's just right click, view options, and then 3D. I'll just do it a bit higher. View options, 3D hover bar, because that one got me lost for a while. Right, so that's just sort of opening them up and spinning them around. I just had an example of doing markups. Oh, not that one. And sort of what's the power for us as structural engineers is if I've got my, here's my shop drawing of a steel cabana. In my shop drawing review process, instead of having, I've got 100 drawings, I can just copy my 3D PDF, copy pages, and just paste that here, paste pages, right, and put my 3D PDF at the front. So anyone that's coming in and checking this straight away has an idea of the structure and what they're looking at, instead of going through sort of 100 drawings to get an idea. So I can just put that at the front. Obviously, you can open up 3D PDFs in a normal Adobe, the reader, you can. PDF Exchange, I haven't worked out how to do it because I use PDF Exchange, but obviously if everyone's using Bluebeam, then you don't really have a problem.
Sorry, Nick, so in that 3D mode, does all the element information get captured in that? So if you click on a beam, does that tell you what the beam size is, for
Yeah,
example?
so all the metadata that comes from the Navisworks model. So this
Or
is
the IFC file.
file.
And depending what information they've captured in,
Yeah,
in the
I'm
model.
just trying to see if it does have. So this, so this, yeah, so description down here. So that's going to be the member type. But I exported this from an IFC, a massive Steelwork Navisworks model that we've got. I was going to show how to do that using Revit and Navis, but we had a few technical difficulties. But if I just go back to the Revit hotel, because I exported this from our proper Revit model. That's the one. So let me just get rid of this. Just turn this off. So if I select this now, this has a lot more data in it. You know, the concrete type, and then that's not all of them. Over here, you've got your 3D model tree. So I'm just sort of touching on all the different elements. Go online. There's like, you know, lots of videos describing this. This is a really good one that's an hour long. We go through all the different functionalities. But this model tree, I'm only seeing a certain amount of columns, but you can imagine the amount of data that's in my Revit model. So you can go into columns, manage columns, and now you can see there's all.
Slow that down because it might just on the screen with people on the phone.
Yeah. So this is all the data that's sort of there in the background that I can select to show down in my 3D model.
So you can start creating markups on that specific element or that specific structure or whatnot, and then it starts to create views for you in a 3D environment as opposed to 2D.
Yeah. So if I've got, sorry,
Sorry.
That's all right.
I get excited about this stuff
Yeah.
because it's something people don't realize Bluebeam can do.
Just one question. So having it like a 3D model like this whole entire building, just, you know, you can actually get the whole data out as a report and get the whole quantities, you know, areas, volumes, everything out from those information that you have got there.
Yeah, you can export you're talking about down here, summary, and export to CSV.
And get the whole thing. Add a column for formulas and things like that, and you can get the whole entire, you know, like a
volume of concrete,
Yeah,
volume of columns.
So you can do a complete quantity takeoff from the IFC from this if you're trying to figure out what your concrete quantities are, and even actually start applying formulas where your rate.
You can just count the downlights, for example, in the building.
Yeah.
You know, all the downlights.
Yeah. So for a subcontractor who maybe can't afford a CostX program or a large estimation package, plus, you know, Bluebeam can kind of get them.
I mean, instead of sending them, like, right now what people are doing is they are sending him plan after plan, the digital PDF plans after plan, and they use the plans to get the quantities out. But if you were to send them a IFC model, entire model, they can get the whole entire building at one go, rather than going through plan after plan after plan. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And what Kelly was saying is you can add comments. So if I've got, I don't know where my pen, anyway. So let's say I've got this, oh, sorry about that, just a bit. Say this beam selected I've selected is incorrect, and I want to add a comment to tell the detailer or the draftee that it is so. I want to zoom to the part, and there's a specific reason why I do that, and I'll explain in a sec. And then I want to add a comment. Now this isn't my Bluebeam, so sorry, I've just got to go around and find where your two bars are.
You go to the tool test.
I just got it now.
Oh, that's all right. So I'll just use which one should I use?
Just use that one. Yeah, go through presentation, and then you just go for the details. See what's going on. The detail. That'll show you so
yeah, all right. Let's do this. So obviously, RBG comment, beam size incorrect. Just a bit bigger so we can see it. Much bigger.
Maybe place one more markup on it.
Sorry, yeah. I don't know. The little square. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know what's going on there. Can I just shut that down?
Does anyone have any questions so far about?
I think I just broke your Bluebeam.
Go ahead.
If you have your 3D model and say it's just like a cover page one, are you able to, if you have Nick in just like another sheet, just as a second sheet, are you able to like hyperlink, say that slab, hyperlink it to like a folder and say, this is the drawing?
Yeah, you could. You could hyperlink it to that specific drawing, like sheet or drawing set. Yeah, whichever way that you wanted. You just literally, anytime you want to sort of figure out if you can do something in Bluebeam, just right click and then all the options of what's available. So there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to do that. You might just have to put it on the sheet, a hyperlink.
Oh, I mean like it's hyperlink the slab to the sheet.
You can.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, you should be able to, yeah.
Yeah, because eventually I suppose all drawings are going to be 3D. I mean, that's where it all seems to be going, like slowly. Be able to allow bin modelling in our estimates now. So.
Okay, so just imagine that I've added that comment. What's going on?
That's what happens during live demos, always.
Oh, no, I think we're on here. I think we can get it back. I know. There we go.
What did you do?
I think I was zoomed into a small part of the 3D PDF.
Yeah.
When what I probably wanted to be was looking at the whole thing. Anyway, so pretend that I've added that comment. Can everyone pretend that? So I've got that comment that says beam size incorrect. Up here, you get these markup views, as Kelly was saying. And what Bluebeam does is when you go to a certain location and you add a comment, and takes a screenshot of that of what you're looking at with that comment, and then saves it as a view. So you can't see your comments in 3D, but it can save the snapshot where you created that comment. So if I click, I can go around to all my, I can go around to the different views where I've added those comments, and obviously I can add more, or someone can make a return comment. I hit this little X, so as you can see, it's just this here. There's no 3D element of that. It's just a 2D snapshot. So if I close that, I can go to another comment and just go around the building, looking at all the different comments that I've made.
And then in the actual markups list, you can start replying to those markups and start commenting on next steps, or reject, accept, if you start building out those custom columns in this actual 3DF file, 3D PDF file.
Can you give it a different name? So instead of markup U1, can you say IBG O1 or something like that?
Yeah, so that's
loggable?
Yeah. So you can basically save all of your markups, and then just literally, if it's common ones that you're using, just drag and drop them onto your file in the tool, from the tool chest.
We've just done back the tool chest here. So as an example, we've set this up obviously for our.
So yeah.
So we set this up our app, so obviously that's all of our stuff. But if you were doing a bespoke one, either for your own company or maybe a major project, and where you had multiple contributors, you could have blocks of wouldn't be RBG markup, Arab markup, JPEG markup, whatever. You could probably colorize those, and you can apply layers to these as well. So when they went in front of Arab person clicks it, does their markup. It obviously attributes that as whatever layer, so you can get rid of Arab comments or birds and isolate different things. And yeah, it's obviously can be colorized and it obviously captured. And that comment, that subject line there, is always the first column that appears here. And so there, once you spit that out to a CSV, you can go nuts in obviously filtering and interrogating that data in that environment. So
it'll retain all the properties, so you don't have to reset them. And then the beauty of it is that you can import them and export them and share them with your colleagues. So once you've created them, someone is a new hire at your organization, they just import that profile, so the Arab profile or Robert Bird Group profile, into their system depending on their job function, and then they just turn on and off what they need.
That's good.
Yeah.
And let's say if you want to highlight portions of that structure there, right? I mean, you put a cloud around them.
Yeah.
What happens to that markup if does it become integrated as part of the 3D, or does it save it as a markup view?
No, it's all in that same file. So if I close this file now, all those, or if I did another one and did a big cloud, it's all saved in that one file. You can split it there. What I was sort of researching over the weekend, you can create a report, and that actually has hyperlinks to all the views that are in that 3D PDF as well. So you can just have a list of all the markup views that have been created with comments. Click on that, and it'll hyperlink you to the 3D PDF. But there. So the little icons are obviously where the markups are. You can turn those off. So just be wary that up here there is markup indicators, so that you can obviously hide and show them. So sort of make sure you've got that turned on so you don't miss any comments. And the reason that I centered the part before I made the comment is I'm a bit nervous to sort of try it.
Try it.
Try it,
That's
okay.
what this group's for.
Yeah, all right. So if I zoom into, oh god, to somewhere here, and I haven't centered the part or anything, and I'm going to play it safe and just use a, and I do this, fix or something, fix. Now if I close this, I think it's probably going to be nice and kind to me today. See how that markup is up in the middle of nowhere? I'm not sure where it creates a snapshot compared to where it's saved, where it puts the markup indicator, but I've just found the other ones, if you center the part before you do it, see how they're all on the bottom there, where that one's sort of off in the middle of nowhere? If I do that same comment and send it zoom part and do that exact same comment, we'll just see, fix, and close that. See how that's now on that member, whereas the other one's up in the middle of nowhere? So I find that zooming to the part locates the markup indicator sort of where you want it to be. Otherwise it can sort of just, the markup indicators don't necessarily match where you're making what element or what you're making the comment on.
So a suggestion would be that it snaps to the actual part, sort of, rather than just sitting in the middle of space.
Correct. I think it might sit,
it
might sit where your camera is, or don't know the ins and outs of it. So I was going to touch on actually some of the settings for the Revit and Navisworks export, because there are a few little things just to be aware of. So for instance, I was going to show, but I was just trying to explain. Because I can't go into Revit. So if you've got a section box in Revit and you export a 3D PDF using the Bluebeam plugin, the default setting is it uses that section box and exports that box as a 3D PDF and all the elements in it. In Navisworks, if you create a section box, it doesn't do that. You have to actually select the elements you want to export. So usually I just create the section box in Navisworks and then just use the rectangle tool, select them all and export those. I was going to show that, but I can't. And the sort of the last thing I wanted to show is...
Sorry, I've got a question.
Go for it.
Have you had a chance to export the markup reports from the 3D?
No.
You can do that now, if you want. If you go to your original file, just
down here, go.
Just down there. So you can export it into CSV PDF summary. So that's probably the one I would choose if you want to get it to visually. And then append.
Just go.
Click. It should just spit out. Oh, so you've done it, to CSV, so you'll be able to.
It should.
Yeah. Or you can export it to a PDF, and then I think that's where you'll see those hyperlinks start to happen back into the original file.
Yeah, so that's relatively boring.
Because I think the PDF ones, it exports the image with it as well.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So if you do the same thing, but select PDF. Right, yeah.
Just go.
You might have to append and hyperlink the to current PDF.
Yeah, there we are.
A way to make that look large.
Okay.
Check
it.
Yeah, have you ever done that and it's huge, like it's 60 megabytes, 70 meg when you export that list? Have you ever?
There we go.
Yeah, right. Have you ever
So yeah, so that's what we're talking about now.
Now it's hyperlinked back to where it was in your.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So essentially, if you zoomed out, you should be able to see that.
I'm just
That's the
I'm just a bit
Like-
nervous.
Markups
Yeah.
on it. If you have too many markups on it, I think on different layers, it spits it out as different markups in different boxes, rather than just one markup. So if you, I don't know, put the markup on, draw a few detail lines, that will be a separate markup, rather than combine. You need to group it.
And as long as you
So if
do
they're
it
on
all,
separate layers on,
Yeah.
so like if you're using spaces out of Revit or something like that, and then you're creating.
as
various
long as you
layers.
don't as long as you don't exit that markup view, it should all be the same one.
No, but if you start putting like example some lines or something, or one of your
Yeah. So just for everyone that's sort of online, so that when you export the PDF, it automatically becomes the second sheet, and then it
Yeah.
is just hyperlinked.
All hyperlinked to that original one. The other thing too, all that data that you're seeing is just based on the columns on the bottom in the markups list that you've turned on and off. So if it's as much or as little data as you want to display in that markup summary report.
And then the views that we're I'm so nervous about this. So all those views you can obviously rename. You can rename those going to manage view. Now there's no shortcut, and you can't get this window to stay up. So you have to go into this drop down and go manage views. RBG1, RBG2, and so on. So one other thing I wanted to touch on, I know we're sort of running out of time.
No, take your time.
Is the transform. So this little button, this little option up here, the 3-arrow axis. Once you've clicked that on, once you've clicked and turned that on, now when you select an element, you get this little box, which allows you to move and play around with that element, and to sort of do whatever you want with it. And then, you can use this to obviously show if you're moving something. I'll show an example of a second where you can save views and then play them and cycle through and sort of create either exploded objects or construction sort of stage analysis, and quick and easy way to do it. And then if you obviously ever accidentally do this, which I've done a few times, you can right click and just reset selected parts, and it kind of goes back to its normal position. One other thing you would have noticed then is Bluebeam, because it's smart, knows you want to keep looking at that object. I don't know. So once I select that object, see how it makes all the objects in the line of view transparent. So you can imagine if I've got a big structure, you can select an element and then zoom around, and it will just constantly make those elements in that line of view transparent. But say you want to turn that off, because I've had to do that. It's just under Preferences, Advanced 3D Rendering, Auto Hide Selection Occlusions. So you turn that. So if I turn that off, now everything will remain sort of the normal color and shading. If I reset that. So if I go over to sort of my old one, I did some colors, save some new views. So I'll just quickly explain. If I want to make a new view, if I rotate this around, zoom in here, I can go manage views and go plus. So whatever I'm looking at now, it creates a sort of a snapshot of that, and I can call that new view. I'm not going to say that because I've created a few others already here. And then up here you've got your play option. So if I go to cycle views, it's going to cycle through a whole lot of views that I have saved previously where I've moved some elements out. So I'm pretty sure it should sort of go together, like sort of build your core, build your outriggers, build your columns, build your slabs.
That's like a little mini.
Yeah.
File. Yeah.
Yeah, and just I think explode too. Yep. So all I'm doing is changing a shot, moving all the elements out, and then moving them back. So if I play this one, it should just blow it up and So you can imagine you can do some pretty cool things. I was going to try and do the whole tower, but I think it's better. Yeah, it's better on a small scale.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah, that was sort of it. I think for the Navisworks and the Revit plugins, you need to have either the CAD or the Extreme version is the only thing.
Yeah, definitely. So in order to get the plugins that Nick's talking about, you need CAD or Extreme, and then Extreme gets you all the automated batch functionality.
I knew I could justify it now. I got 2 copies, 2 licensing copies, so hard to sell it at work, but now I can.
Yeah.
And so just lastly, before I showed the cross-sectioning up here, just the section box, similar to sort of all other BIM software. You can obviously just move it around, resize it, you know, that sort of thing.
All right, so my name's Kelly Furtado. I'm a senior channel account manager for the Asia Pacific region. So my role at Bluebeam is basically I'm the first employee here, based in Australia, number 1, and number 2, I work with resellers in the region to help provide sales, service, and support for our technology. Another part of my role is to gain feedback from the industry. So when we're looking at creating future development of our software, what we try to do is obviously hear what you guys are saying about the software and what suggestions you need for, say, Australia or New Zealand or the regions that you guys are working within the project environment. So just to give you a little bit of background, Bluebeam's always been a very user or customer-centric company. So everything that that is in Bluebeam Review has been built by customer suggestions. And with that theme in mind, in 2018, we did a survey to sort of understand what customers need and want from a software solution in order to adopt it for their software. So again, trying to keep these sort of 3 themes in mind. What sort of the main feedback was people wanted to maximize productivity, improve project predictability, and minimize risk on construction sites. So with all the feedback that we received, those were sort of the 3 major value drivers as to why people would adopt or use the software solution. So with that in mind, and for future development, Bluebeam is looking at ensuring that we hit on these value drivers for the industry. And what you're kind of going to see from Bluebeam, and again, I can't really go into a lot of detail about the ins and outs of 2019 when it's released in a couple of months. But the themes here and what you'll start to see as we develop it is markup technology. We're hoping, we will be improving our measurement tools so that you guys get that accuracy and efficiency in the tendering process. So when you're doing, quantity takeoffs, when you're actually, trying to measure to scale and things like that, you'll have a little bit more precision in that in 2019. Improved collaboration. So you'll start to see Bluebeam develop solutions for mobile devices. So we want to be able for you guys to access your drawings, whether it's on phone, on a tablet, as easy as possible when you guys are at construction sites. Another thing that we're improving for collaboration is obviously localization. So it doesn't do you guys any good if we start developing software in the Imperial system or we're not taking into consideration, Australian standards. So that's where we're moving the software so that it recognizes what, from a local perspective, what your drawing sheets or title blocks and what your standards here are for your drawing set in Australia. Expedite workflows. So one of the things that we're working on is the rendering engine improvements. So we're looking to have that tie into the power of your hardware. So if you've invested in graphics cards, additional RAM and that, you'll be able to sort of move through your drawings a lot quicker and a lot faster with the power of your actual PC. Again, 2018, there was a lot of change, obviously user interface and the stability of the product because we changed the entire code of Bluebeam Review so that it was more enabled for cloud computing for the future. we're really focusing on the quality and stability of the product in 2019, and again, improving your file load time. So if you do have an infrastructure drawing set with thousands and thousands of sheets, you should be able to navigate through that a lot quicker for future releases. Open platform and standards. So Bluebeam is working, and as you can see, with a lot of other companies to integrate into our studio platform. So I think one of the releases was with BIM 360 Docs. So integrations with other software vendors that are outside of the Bluebeam ecosystem, because that is something we definitely believe in. We don't want to restrict your ability to choose what's going to work for you guys on your projects. So that's definitely something that we're moving towards. And then again, being a little bit more enterprise ready, so easy to adopt and scale across your organization. So one of the key feedbacks here in Australia is a lot of people, if they've got a US based head office, finding it difficult to potentially get licenses and acquire licenses, and I think that has to do a lot with the way our licensing system works. So that's something that we are going to endeavor for future releases to make it a little bit more enterprise ready, you know, single sign-on, things like that, when you're acquiring licenses. And just because I don't do it justice, but just so you can kind of understand the future of where Bluebeam's heading, and what we're sort of working on here. Here's a little video. This was not sponsored by Bluebeam. This was something that the B1M developed, if you haven't seen this already, with regards to a presentation they saw at one of our shows in the UK. But this gives you a little idea of what we called Project Atlas. We acquired a company that's essentially like Google Maps for construction. So again, when you're walking by a certain space on a project, you'll be able to sort of get notifications and things like that. But this is the sort of the best way to sort of preview that, and what the future of Bluebeam sort of holds. I don't know if you guys will be able to hear.
Sites or elsewhere. From putting design information streamed from a single point of truth into the palms of operatives, to information by geolocation, remote site monitoring, personnel location tracking, live markups, and the seamless transfer of as-built information, connected job sites improve communication, productivity, and safety for everyone involved in a project. With the intuitive technology supporting these sites advancing and now more widely available than ever before, connected job sites are only expected to become more commonplace in 2019. Meanwhile, developments continue to be made in connecting people and consolidating systems through digital mapping engines that contain and visualize construction data. New technology like Bluebeam Atlas, set to be available in 2019, is leveraging geospatial mapping to rethink mobile information access. Mapping design and construction data onto a real-world job site, Atlas uses geolocation to present project information from multiple systems relevant to your physical location, making traditional folder structures obsolete and streamlining any access-critical process like snagging, inspections, and more. While autonomous vehicle.
So yeah, that's sort of a little bit of a snippet of what you'll see. So Bluebeam's going to be launching some new products, so we won't just be your traditional Bluebeam review PDF markup tool or real-time collaboration tool. What you'll start seeing is that we start adopting or acquiring these companies to obviously build into our solution and develop products that you guys will get access to moving into the future.
Very good.
Yeah. Does anyone have any...
That solves the problem of the underground services.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe.
fingers crossed. Exactly. So if you guys have any pilot projects that you would like to try Project Atlas on, let me know, because that's something we definitely want to do and sort of nut out all the kinks and obviously the infrastructure with the internet here in Australia can tend to be a little bit touch and go depending on where you are. So that's definitely something that we're looking for. But again, 2019 should be released in a couple of months, and hopefully at the next user meeting, we'll have a lot more information to provide you guys in the future.
Excellent. No worries. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Well, that's pretty much it. Thank you for everyone for making the time to come into the office and dial in. Just a couple of closing announcements. The next meeting, there is another one. It's going to be on the 11th of June at Robert Bird, just down the road in Castlereagh Street. Tickets will actually go on sale in the next half hour if you're keen.
Was that 9th of June?
11th of June. We pushed it back a little bit. And that'll be an evening meeting. That won't be a morning meeting. As always, please join the LinkedIn group, and please follow on LinkedIn Bluebeam Communities, and there's also a YouTube channel as well with some really cool stuff from Bluebeam and from other providers there. And last but not least, I'll get a plug in for Building Smart Australia. There's another Getting It Right seminar series, which was really well received last year, and they've had a couple already, a couple of not Getting It Right seminars, but a couple of other seminars already, which were really well attended. If you've got a chance, just keep your eye out for those. The first one's on the 10th of April, I believe. Hasn't been the location hasn't been signed off yet, but yeah, keep an eye out for that. It'll be a great show. There'll be great sort of presentations and a good networking event for BIM and IFC and other standards.
And I think in the June meeting we've got tips and tricks section with
That's right.
Deepak Manny from CAD Group. So he does a 32 tips and tricks. So I'd recommend bring your laptop, follow along, to obviously get to use the tips that he shows you at the next session.
But yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, look forward to, hope everyone got a good bit of information there about IFC and CPC and everything else, and 3D PDFs. That was a really great presentation. Thanks, Nick. And thanks, Kelly, for giving us the rundown.
Sorry, I can't give you guys more information. They've delayed the release, so that's why I thought it was going to be ready for today. And I was like, they're like, you cannot say this. I'm like,
No worries.
it's like knowing a secret, not telling your friends, you know? Like.
But yeah, thank you very much. I'll let everyone go. I'm sure everyone's busy trying to get to work or to somewhere else. But yeah, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate everyone.
And thanks to the people on the phone as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for dialing in, guys. Hope you got plenty out of this.